The John C. Blanchard House in Ionia, Michigan was completed in 1881. It's situated on a 1-acre lot, including the small stream at the west edge of the property, and frontage on both Main Streets and Adams Street. This is an example of the Italianate style of architecture with its shallow hip roof and fairly wide overhang. The walls are double-course brick under a veneer of variegated sandstone. This distinctive pink stone was taken from a quarry southeast of Ionia, which was partly owned by Mr. Blanchard. The house has remained structurally unchanged for 140 years now. It still has the slate roof and the widow's walk at its peak surrounded by a wrought iron railing. The black metal fence along the sidewalks is not original, but replaced an earlier wrought iron fence, shown here in a photograph from the 1920s. That fence too is not original. The first front fence was a tall wooden picket fence with a large gate, shown in this photo from 1882. The landscaping was somewhat different in those days, but still a park-like setting as it is today. On the east, the driveway, now grass-covered, leads back to the brick carriage house. The Michigan Historical Marker was installed around 2004. And as it says there, the house is also listed in the National Register of Historic Places as of 1974. Before we go inside the house, let's learn a little bit about the folks who lived here and their family. Just who were John and Harriet Blanchard, and how did they get to be wealthy? Like many other stories of central Michigan pioneers, our story begins in central New York. John Blanchard was born there in 1822. He up and ran away from home at the ripe old age of 14. Michigan, he knew, was the place to find his fortune. He got a job at a farm in Shiawassee and proved to be a very industrious worker. In 1838, now aged 16, he made up his mind that land speculation was the way to make a fortune. He walked to Ionia to register a claim at the federal land office on a 40-acre farm. The following year, his parents and siblings came to Michigan to join him, and they settled on land that would later become the village of Muir. John joined them there, getting a job at a general store in Lyons, right next to a law office. He was intrigued with the idea of being a lawyer, so he read the law every waking moment, and by the age of 19, he passed the bar and became a lawyer. He turned out to be a natural at it and did very well. The widow Euseba Brewster arrived in Lyons in 1839 from Burlington, Vermont, along with her son and daughter. The Brewsters were descendants of the Mayflower colonists, of which they were justly proud. Her daughter was named Harriet Augusta Brewster, and she was 13 years old. John Blanchard courted young Harriet Brewster, and they were married in October of 1845. He was 23, she was 19. To pursue further success, John left the law practice in Lyons and they moved to Ionia County seat in 1850. He had bought up quite a few parcels and lots in Ionia Village and selected a prime plot to establish their first home. It was a modest little wood frame house, but still quite stately. This 1851 house is still standing. It was moved twice and now sits a couple blocks east of its original location. At the age of 28, he was elected Ionia County Prosecuting Attorney. In addition, he cultivated a long string of successes in law, politics, land speculation, lumber, stone, and railroading. Harriet and John raised 4 children. Hannah was the eldest of the Blanchard children, born in Lyons in 1846. Lucia was the second daughter and the first to be married. She married Benjamin Vosper of Saranac, and they lived in the house just east of the Blanchard mansion. They had no children who survived to adulthood. Mr. Vosper had served in the 21st Michigan during the Civil War with T.G. Stevenson. A year later, Lucia's older sister Hannah married Mr. Stevenson. They lived here in the Blanchard mansion after the death of John and Harriet. They too had no children. Nettie Blanchard married Albinus Todd in 1876. Albinus was principal of Ionia High School, then superintendent for 5 years. They started a horse farm in Carson City, but they divorced sometime after in 1900. They had 1 son. John Blanchard Jr. was married several times, none of which ended well. He tried his hand at a number of trades over the years, but left no heirs to the Blanchard estate and died a tragic death. After the Blanchard children had married and moved out, John and Harriet felt that the old frame house was much too modest, so they had a grand new house designed and built on the same spot. There is much more to the Blanchard story. Details of their fascinating lives are contained in this small book by David McCord, available from the Ionia County Historical Society. Throughout this tour of the John Blanchard house, I will utilize floor plans to show where we're located in the house at any given time. Hopefully that will help you to get your bearings as if you were actually walking through the house. Behind the impressive carved walnut doors, you'll find the impressive curved stairway. This front hallway greeted the Blanchards' guests, telling them immediately that this was the home of an influential family. The light fixture on the newel post is porcelain and brass, and was originally a gas light. Influential citizens like the Blanchards had certain social standards to meet, and entertained many such guests at their house. The huge front parlors where the Blanchards hosted their visitors with dramatic readings, presentations, and musical recitals. This room is where most of our monthly public meetings take place and where we host special presentations on historical subjects. What you see here is the arrangement of tables in preparation for a meeting of the Ladies' Literary Guild. This is also where the primary activities take place when folks rent the house, where weddings, reunions, ceremonies, and receptions are held. Above us is the impressive gasolier. Many people call it a chandelier, but chandeliers are made for candles. It's remarkable that these gasoliers were so well preserved throughout the house, and the ornate plaster medallions at the ceiling are generally in good shape. As seen in this photo taken in 1882, at the north end of the room was a huge mirror in front of the center window, not entirely for the sake of vanity, but to help reflect light within the room. We are proud to showcase an impressive display of taxidermist handiwork. This display, with many other pieces in the house, were passed to the Historical Society from the local library's collection some years ago. The fireplace here is made of Ohio bluestone with a faux marble finish. The shallow firebox was built to burn candle coal, a specific type of bituminous coal with a bright flame. This little alcove is referred to as the conservatory. The brilliant sunlight flooding the space through the huge curved casement windows made the space an excellent greenhouse for Mrs. Blanchard. Here's a photo of the arrangement taken in 1882 that shows vines strung across the space on wires. This area is often used for seasonal or themed displays from the museum's collection. There are some accounts that say Mrs. Blanchard did not like a large banquet table, and they would be served at a small table for their daily meals. When they had dinner guests, she preferred to bring in several smaller tables and seat people in separate groups instead of the traditional arrangement. This allowed conversations to carry on without having to shout across a large tabletop. One of the 6 doors in the room is what we call the china closet. The space contains some dinnerware that belonged to the Blanchard family, as well as some china from Governor Green's estate and a set from the former state hospital in Ionia. There is also some silver that belonged to Ionia's own Civil War hero, Captain James Kidd, who rode with General George Custer and the 7th Michigan Cavalry. Here in the kitchen, the stove is, of course, not original to the room. A wood stove surely stood at this spot at some point because we can still see where the smoke pipe connected to the chimney. The sink and lights in the southeast corner date from the modernization of the house in the 1930s. To accommodate rentals, many of which are catered events, this kitchen is used for staging refreshments and sometimes full meals. So the stove is relatively modern, as is the refrigerator in the back room. The electrical system has been upgraded to handle warming trays, microwaves, and coffee makers. Below the extremely tall cupboard doors is a row of bins, probably used to store potatoes, onions, maybe even sugar and flour. To the left of those is a full-size dumbwaiter door. According to an 1881 article in the local newspaper, adjacent to the kitchen was a washroom, provided with stationary tubs, faucets, etc. Holes in the hardwood flooring in this small room attest to the fact that there was more in here than just a steam radiator at one time. This may have been that room, connecting the kitchen and the office space. Today we're happy to offer some souvenirs of Ionia, photo prints, informational booklets and videos, and other historically related items. John Blanchard conducted his law business from this room, which could be closed off from the rest of the house by the big pocket doors at the front hallway. In the northwest corner of the room is a door to the front porch that was used by Mr. Blanchard's clients to access the office without disturbing the family. Here below the portrait of Mr. Blanchard is another beautiful fireplace. The same 1881 Sentinel Standard article quoted in the kitchen described this room as a very large room furnished in black walnut intended for a bedroom. The commodious closet and bathroom open into this room. It seems quite likely that when the Blanchards entertained politicians, tycoons, and dignitaries in their home, the gentlemen would retire after dinner to this office for brandy and cigars. There would be spittoons. Now we ascend the impressive stairway to the second floor landing. This space would have been ideal for a showcase of art and nicely lit place for reading and lounging on a summer day. To the left of the landing is the Blanchards' master bedroom, with hardware and gasoliers similar to the rest of the house. Another very large room, this bedroom once had a freestanding stove for heating, located near the center of the south wall. Before the walls were refinished in the 1990s, you could see where the smoke pipe from this stove went through the wall into the next room. There were heavy curtains in the windows during cooler weather, and with all these windows and the louvered walnut shutters, the temperature of the room could be regulated pretty well. A favorite feature in this room is a large circular hair wreath displayed on the south wall. Through the south door we come to the dressing room. In the corner behind the closet door is a nice little wash basin. The water for this sink was delivered by gravity. There are 3 attics in the house, and in the south attic is a large water tank. Water was pumped up into that tank from the cistern in the basement. Some of that water was piped into the furnace room where there was a small boiler separate from the heating system. Hot water. Notice too the large closet. This was a fairly modern feature for a house in 1880, and this house has lots of closet space. It was said that Mrs. Blanchard enjoyed being rich. She didn't like to go to town to visit the seamstress and the milliner, and Harriet would have her fittings done in this room. Across the hall to the east is what we call the tea room, or Mrs. Blanchard's sitting room. It's a cozy little upstairs parlor where Mrs. Blanchard could entertain her lady friends. In this room is another beautiful faux marble fireplace and several musical instruments of the period and miscellaneous furnishings. Passing back down the hall to the back rooms, on the west we find a guest room for visiting family. An interesting aspect of this room is the louvered shutters, which are replicas of the shutters in the main part of the house, but scaled down to fit the smaller room size. And again, the large closet space. The Blanchards' 4 children were grown and married off by the time they had this house built. Their son John might have lived here for a while between marriages. That's an interesting tale for another time. A few steps further down the back hallway, and we come to the servants' quarters. These are the most modest of all the rooms in the house, a sitting room with a small bedroom off to the right. The room is filled with children's furniture and artifacts. This surely would not have been the case when the Blanchards lived here, and the sleeping room is used to store our collection of vintage garments and environmentally sensitive items. The Blanchards' live-in servant girl had direct access to the kitchen by way of the back stairs. Definitely not as elegant as the front stairs, of course, but they will lead our tour back to the first floor. That's a brief tour of the Blanchard house, a very brief tour. There are many, many stories that can be told about the house and its occupants over the years, as well as the artifacts themselves, large and small. But there's one more feature of this historic site to share before we're finished. Behind the house, as with most homes of the period, sits the aforementioned carriage house. Before we had an off-site storage facility, this is where the overflow was stored. Artifacts of local historical importance that we just didn't have room for to display properly, as well as the seasonal or event-specific items. But in recent months, this space is being converted into a public display space for our growing collection of vintage 19th century tools. In addition, this space will be a working wood shop and possibly a space to do a little blacksmithing as well. The intent is to provide not only a museum of old tools and trades, but also a space for demonstrations and doing real repairs on occasion. Hopefully by the spring of 2022, it will be fully functional and open to the public. So I thank you for your attention and your interest in the John C. Blanchard House, and we hope that you can visit one day for a real live tour and a lot more stories.